Ahoy! Brimstone Sands is on the horizon for New World, and with that, there is a new weapon and legendary gathering tools, as well as legendary bags, so there's a good chance you will need a decent amount of gold. Now here's the deal, there are a lot of things that you can do beforehand to prepare for Brimstone, to make extra gold when Brimstone comes out, but unfortunately, if you're just starting now, you might already be too late for quite a few of those. However, while I was playing on the PTR, I noticed quite a few things in the new zone or surrounding mechanics with the new zone that actually make certain resources a lot more accessible, meaning they will drop in value when the patch comes out. As such, you may be better off selling them now, especially if you have been stockpiling them, or especially if you're using them as your gold farming method as well. Let's begin with some resources that come from herbs or Hyssop. What you're seeing here right in front of you is the central trading hub of Brimstone Sands. You can see all of the crafting stations, all of the trading stations are here. If we go just a little bit over here, just outside the city, just in front of the gates, you will see that there are herbs right here. They look a little different, but they're here. And there are plenty of them, as you can see on the map right here. So this entire area is covered in herbs, and they have their own specific drop pool for this zone. And this drop pool is three things. Basil, which is honestly pretty cheap already, so it doesn't really matter. Garlic, which is fairly expensive already. And Tarragon, which is usually one of the most expensive herbs that you can get. And, well, now you can basically do your trading, your crafting, and then just hop in front of the door and very easily farm garlic and Tarragon very, very quickly. And I will show you what I did here. I did a little bit of a loop, which is around 4.5 minutes. If you have better gathering tools, it's even shorter. It's around 4 minutes. And I just measured how much Hyssop, how much garlic, how much Tarragon I would get in that time. By the end of this loop, the first herbs had already started respawning, so it's completely fine to just cycle this over and over and over, or do it between crafts, between trading post stops, in order to get the resources. Out of this one quick run, I got around 300 Hyssop and 25 garlic, as well as 25 Tarragon and then 23 basil. And that was without any harvesting luck, harvesting yield, or whatever you want that would significantly increase the gathering amounts. As such, I am 100% certain that especially Tarragon, but also garlic, will drop in value. Even Hyssop may drop in value a little bit, because while there are pretty quick and easy farm spots for this, they are usually not close to the central cities for higher level areas. And as we're already on the topic of herbs, there are also the new legendary gathering tools. These are very, very interesting because they don't come with a traditional extra perk, so to speak. Instead, they have this special perk bucket, which we can already see on New World Database. And this has so-called alignments. So for example, the death alignment gives you a chance to get death modes when you finish gathering any node related to the gathering tool that you're using. These alignments exist for any element, any type of mode, and there doesn't seem to be any way to influence which one you'll get. This just seems to be a random roll, since there's no item that can force craft this onto your gathering tool. The legendary gathering tools were an absolute headache to craft on the test server. If any New World dev ever happens to watch this video, please add crafting jewelry to the PTR without having to craft that yourself, and also give us a way to get town buffs. So because of these slightly misaligned circumstances, I had a roll pool from 590 to 600 instead of just the maxed out crafting potential. But I managed to get a legendary logging axe and a legendary sickle. Both of them rolled with water alignment, so they would be easy to compare, though I'm assuming the drop rate for every type of element would be the same with this effect. I did the same herb run I had already done before, and this time it took me 4 minutes because of the better perks, and I ended up with a total of 60 water modes. To compare, I did a wood run in front of Windswood. Here I ended up with 28 water modes after roughly 4 minutes. So the gathering of motes was actually half as fast when logging, even though it was just these small and easy to chop trees. A few times I ended up getting 2 water motes instead of 1, and I was wondering what that was about, so I figured maybe this is something to do with the higher tier materials that you can gather. So I went up to Morningdale and I gathered some of the higher tier materials. The results here were disappointing. Even wire fiber and ironwood would not provide you with more resources. I actually ended up getting less overall motes from the ironwood. The drop rate usually here was just 1 or 2 motes as well. As such, the results here aren't exactly overwhelming. Under ideal circumstances with no one else around you gathering and you not having any downtime, you would get around 450 motes per hour, along with everything else that you gather, keep that in mind. But obviously this adds up over time, especially for people who do a lot of gathering. I think this will especially influence the more expensive modes, such as for example on my server Soul modes, that are hovering near 4 gold, whereas the ones that are already lower priced because they're relatively accessible will not drop massively after this. By itself, this effect will also take quite a while to have an impact because not everyone is going to go straight for the 600 gear score gathering tools, and not everyone is necessarily going to get the right version of them. Not everyone is going to run around with a 600 gear score soul alignment harvesting tool for everything one day into the patch. But there is another factor that will be more noticeable immediately that plays into this. Brimstone Sands as a zone is full of the tier 5 reagent animals, like for example the salamander snail, which I marked here, and it's just everywhere around the map in all the quest areas that you go to. As all of the players that are level 60 will probably go into this zone and gather these materials, you'll definitely see a lot more players with a lot more motes than they would usually have, and since it's the higher tier ones, you get a lot of motes relatively quickly. This effect will probably slow down a little bit once most people are done with the PvE quests in the zone, but by then more of them will likely also have 600 gear score gathering tools. So really it's a bit of a trickle effect where one thing plays into the other, but overall I expect the prices for motes to go down in general. Along with that, also obviously the higher tier materials of the same form, such as the quintessences, will likely also drop at least a little bit in price. How much of an impact that will have is hard to say, because obviously those need a lot of motes in order to even get them in the first place, but I do expect that to be at least somewhat relevant as well. And that effect will then also ripple onto other things, namely especially any form of cut gems, because you need quintessences to cut the highest tier gems. Again, I don't expect all of those effects to be massive and immediate, but if you're stockpiling large amounts of motes or any form of essence quintessence, then maybe consider if you want to sell off at least some of them, so that you're not disappointed if the price ends up dropping later. Since we were already looking at the map, there's another interesting thing I found on newworld-map.com. Look at this area from a distance compared to the rest of the map. This resource is platinum. For some reason, Brimstone Sands is just absolutely full of platinum nodes. Arguably, there were too few beforehand, but now they are everywhere. So if you happen to have a stockpile of platinum ores for whatever reason, now may be the time to get rid of them. Platinum ingots will probably still have decent value because you still need the lower tiers to get there, but platinum itself should be a lot easier to come by. And that also refers back to my previous point, because platinum veins not only drop brilliant gems, but also pristine gems. So not only is there a chance that tier 5 gems themselves will end up cheaper, but also that both core components of cut gems will be cheaper, so overall I would expect prices to drop in that area in general. There are other higher tier nodes like orichalcum or ironwood in Brimstone as well, but generally there are only a few of each of those compared to the massive amount of platinum veins. Instead, most of the area is covered in new resources that are exclusive to Brimstone Sands, which doesn't really matter for this video. What definitely matters for us are the changes to town boards. Take a look at this quest here on the live client. 50 Nightcrawler bait, 5.7 coins, 979 territory standing, and 780 XP. Not too bad. And now look at this town board on the test client in Brimstone Sands. Fisherfolk needed, this time it's bread bait. 5.7 coins, 750 territory standing, a little bit less, but only 209 XP. In other words, leveling through the town board is dead. It does not provide sufficient XP anymore to justify it, especially since there are also changes to quests and so on, so questing is going to be the way for leveling. And that means that people are gonna buy way less of the resources that are needed for townboard quests. So for example, salmon is likely gonna be worth a lot less, which is ironic because they're releasing a new legendary fish in Brimstone Sands, which guarantees that you catch salmon, which will have less value now, so not sure what that's about. The only people that I could still see doing townboards are people that are either looking to farm their territory standing, or the ones that are leveling professions like for example the armorsmithers or weaponsmithers quests, which are still gonna use some resources, but many of the current resources will be less important. Along with fish, this is especially true for potions. And then there was the change that happened on PTR. When the Heartrunes were first announced and people found out the recipe, it required a lot of runestones, and a bit of a runestone frenzy started on the live servers. Now the ingredients required for the Heartrunes have been reduced. You only need 5 runestones per upgrade from the base form, so a total of 10 runestones, which is really not that much. Obviously you still do need some runestones over what you currently need for things, and runestones will generally be valued in the new patch because it's not like there's suddenly no reason to build runestone stopwatches anymore, even though you may be using some other resources as well with the scarabs. So this one is less definite than the others, but I feel like maybe runestones are slightly overpriced at the moment, slightly inflated, because people thought we're gonna need tons and tons and tons of them. Decide for yourself what you want to do with that information. I stayed out of the entire runestone gamble entirely. I didn't even buy any in the first place. There are some other things that we still need to talk about when it comes to preparing for Brimstone. On one hand, something related with Umbral Shards, and on the other hand, also some things that I would recommend buying. If you'd like to see that or more New World info in general, please consider subscribing and clicking the bell. That really helps me out. Other than that, thanks for watching. Hope to see you for the next one soon. SLOTH, out.